Compensation-related laws. We all know wages may be the price of labor, just as interest is the price of capital and profit, the price of risk carrying, but from social point of view, they are unique in that they not only constitute payment for this effort, but also provide the means of subsistence for those who supply the effort. In this lesson, we will describe the compensation provisions under Income Tax Act 1961, explain the Payment of Wages Act 1936, and state the provisions of Minimum Wages Act 1948. After going through this presentation, you should be able to describe the Income Tax Act, explain the Payment of Wages Act, state Minimum Wages Act, understand Wage Policy of India. Income tax is a species of direct tax. It is governed by the Income Tax Act 1961. By virtue of authority vested in the central government by the Constitution of India, it has enacted Income Tax Act 1961. The Act is administered by Central Board of Direct Taxes (CBDT). The CBDT has framed rules to achieve the purpose of the Act and to ensure proper governance thereof. Every year, the Finance Minister gives his detailed tax proposals, which are included in the Part B of the Finance Bill. Income tax is an annual tax on total income of a person in the previous year. The remuneration received by an individual is taxable under the head salaries, irrespective of the fact whether the remuneration is termed as salary or wages. The annual value of house property is chargeable under the head income from house property. An assessee is required to pay tax in a particular financial year preceding the assessment year on the basis of his estimated income. In order to plan a tax-efficient package, you should know the provisions of tax laws governing salaries, the exemptions available for various types of reimbursements and allowances, and the rules pertaining to valuation of various types of perquisites. Your medical expenses reimbursed by your employer are tax-exempt up to Rs 15,000 per year. The reimbursement of leave travel expenses incurred by you and your family on travel to any place in India is exempt to the extent of the actual amount spent. Transport allowance is meant to compensate you for the cost incurred in commuting to your place of work. Motor car perquisite can substantially reduce the taxable salary of senior executives. Instead of providing a rent-free house, most companies prefer to pay house rent allowance to their employees. If your domestic help, like sweeper, watchman, or gardener, has been engaged by your employer, regardless of the amount spent by the employer, the taxable value of such a perquisite will be Rs 120 per month per helper. The contribution made by your employer to a recognized provident fund (PF) is exempt to the extent of 12% of your salary. The objective of Payment of Wages Act is to ensure regular and prompt payment of wages and to prevent the exploitation of a wage earner by prohibiting arbitrary fines and deductions from his wages. Application for payment of wages to persons employed in any factory. It is not applicable to wages which average Rs 1,600 per month or more. Wages include all remuneration, bonus, or sums payable for termination of service, but do not include house rent reimbursement, light vehicle charges, medical expenses, TA, etc. The central government is responsible for enforcement of the Act in railways, mines, oil fields, and air transport services, while the state governments are responsible for it in factories and other industrial establishments. The main object of the Act is to eliminate all malpractices by laying down the time and mode of payment of wages, as well as securing that the workers are paid their wages at regular intervals without any unauthorized deduction. The Act was amended by the Payment of Wages Amendment Act 2005 in order to enlarge its scope and provide for more effective enforcement. The main amended provision is the enhancement of wage ceiling from Rs 1,600 per month to Rs 6,500 per month for the applicability of the Act, as well as empowering the government to enhance the ceiling by notification in future. A tripartite committee, viz., the Committee on Fair Wage, was set up in 1948 to provide guidelines for wage structures in the country. The report of this committee was a major landmark in the history of formulation of wage policy in India. The Minimum Wages Act 1948 was enacted to safeguard the interests of workers, mostly in unorganized sector, by providing for the fixation of minimum wages in certain specified employments. It binds the employers to pay their workers the minimum wages fixed under the Act from time to time. Its recommendations set out the key concepts of the living wage, minimum wages, and fair wage, besides setting out guidelines for wage fixation. Article 39. The state shall, in particular, direct its policy towards securing a. that the citizen, men and women, equally shall have the right to an adequate livelihood, and b. that there is equal pay for equal work for both men and women. Article 43. The state shall endeavour by suitable legislation or economic organization or in any other way to give all workers, agricultural, industrial or otherwise, work, a living wage, conditions of work ensuring a decent standard of life and full enjoyment of leisure and social and cultural opportunities. Any rational wage policy has to be woven into the socio-economic texture, reflecting the objectives and aspirations of the people of a particular country. Formulation of rational wage policy has always been one of the most significant social or political demands. Initially, as an economic issue, it was mainly the concern of the employer. The state was adopting laissez-faire policy, but with the industrial progress and subsequent industrial balance between employers and employees, wage bargain has become a matter for the threefold concern of the employer, employee, and the state. An important objective of any society is the achievement of maximum economic welfare, the elimination of exceptionally low wages, the establishment of fair labor standards, the protection of wage earners from the effects of rising prices, and the incentive for workers to improve their productive performance. The key considerations in public policy concerning wages or salaries in India may be identified as to end exploitation and provide remuneration to capital and labor, so that while in the interest of the consumers and the primary producers, excessive profits should be prevented by suitable measures of taxation to fix statutory minimum wages in selected industries and promote fair wage agreements in the more organized industries, also to ensure equal pay for equal work, to provide for wage differentials, to regulate wages and salaries, to eliminate or reduce undue disparities, the basic needs of labor, and to secure a living wage for workers. The first plan, 1951 to 1956, suggested that pre-war levels of real wages should be restored as a first step towards living wage through increased productivity. The second plan, 1956 to 1961, stressed improvement in wages through increased productivity stemming from efficiency on the part of the workers, improved layout of plants, and improvement in management practices. The third plan, 1961 to 1966, reinforced the wage policy of the preceding two plans with respect to minimum wage fixation, reduction of disparities and wage differentials, and stressed the role of productivity in raising the living standard of the workers. The fourth plan, 1969 to 1974, did not provide a fresh direction or any shift of the government's wage policy. The fifth plan, 1974 to 1979, recommended that the reward structure of the industrial employees in terms of wage and non-wage benefits must be related to performance records in industrial enterprises. The sixth plan, 1980 to 1985, pointed out that there were marked disparities with respect to wages between the organized and unorganized and urban and rural sectors. The seventh plan, 1985 to 1990, asserted that an important aspect of labor policy related to the formulation of an appropriate wage policy. The eighth plan, 1992 to 1997, laid focus on formulation of wage policy relating to child labor, bonded labor, rural labor, women labor, and interstate migrant labor. The new wage policy for public enterprise should generate their own resources to meet wage revision and enhanced liabilities. Justice Mohan Committee's report reviewed the wage structure of PSUs and has given an entirely different angle. Now let us check if we have understood the various concepts discussed in this lesson clearly. Income tax is an annual tax on total income of a person in the annual income. Right or wrong? Right. Minimum wage and an allowance linked to the cost of living allowance. Right or wrong? Right. Income tax is a kind of indirect tax. Right or wrong? Wrong. Before we end, let us briefly revise what we have studied so far. Income tax is a species of direct tax. It is governed by the Income Tax Act 1961. By virtue of authority vested in the central government by the Constitution of India, it has enacted Income Tax Act 1961. The objective of Payment of Wages Act is to ensure regular and prompt payment of wages and to prevent the exploitation of a wage earner by prohibiting arbitrary fines and deduction from his wages. The central government is responsible for enforcement of the Act in railways, mines, oil fields, and air transport services, while the state government are responsible for it in factories and other industrial establishments. The Minimum Wages Act 1948 was enacted to safeguard the interest of workers, mostly in the unorganized sector, by providing for the fixation of minimum wages in certain specified employments. It binds the employers to pay their workers the minimum wages fixed under the Act from time to time. Any rational wage policy has to be woven into the socio-economic texture, reflecting the objectives and aspirations of the people of a particular country. Formulation of rational wage policy has always been one of the most significant social or political demands. Initially, as an economic issue, it was mainly the concern of the employer. The new wage policy for public enterprise should generate their own resources to meet wage revision and enhanced liabilities.